Okay, in this video, we're ready to start adding bones to our character. So now we're going to be introduced to a completely new tool set, and this is going to be our bones panel. Now this dynamically changes as we select the bone layer. So if I select the vector layer, you're going to see that everything's going to change for the vector tools. But as I select the bone group, you can see everything's dynamically changing. So the first tool that we're going to use from this bone panel is called the Add Bone tool. If you need any tips, be sure to take a look at the tooltip section here. So I'm going to come to right about here on this character, and I'm going to create my first bone simply by clicking and dragging out a bone. Now I can constrain this bone the same way, vertically or horizontally. So I'm going to hold down Shift to constrain this horizontally, and I'm going to drag out my root bone to right about there. So the root bone is basically the parent of all the bones. So all the bones are eventually going to link back to this one bone. So when you move the character around, this is the bone that you want to use to move the entire character. And the reason why we create this root bone like this is so that it's easy to pick up and move around. The next bone I'm going to create is the backbone. So right now you can see that the bone is red. That lets me know that this bone is currently selected. This is the parent. Any bone that I draw after this is what's known as the child. And I'll explain that as I go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the child bone, which is going to be the backbone. So I'm going to hold down Shift, and very close to where this bone was, I'm going to go ahead and drag out my backbone. Now, right off the bat, there's going to be bone snapping, which is going to link these two end bones together. This is actually really handy, especially when we get into using target bones. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a bone up here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick a spot right about here, and I'm just going to hold down Shift and create my new bone. So with these bones, something to keep in mind is where you first draw out your bone. Where it ends up sometimes doesn't matter as much. So when I created this bone acts as a rotation point. As we bind our character so that everything works a lot more efficiently, you'll see exactly what these bones do, but just know that where you're first connecting these bones is important. And it's going to be especially important here in the arms. So let's go ahead and let's select this backbone, because what we want to do is we want to parent the arms to this torso bone. So think about your own structural anatomy. Think about where things are connected. Your arms aren't connected to your head. They're connected back to your torso. So let's go ahead and select this bone by holding Alt on the keyboard and left clicking. And as you can see here, that's one of the tool tips, to Alt to select a bone. There's also a Select Bone tool. Now this basically does the same thing. This is just a quick shortcut. But the Select Bone tool is right here. This does come in handy and we will be using it. And that is B on the keyboard. So making sure we're on our Add Bone tool, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drag out a shoulder bone. Now with this, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And again, it's important where I put this rotation. It doesn't make sense to put my top of my bone up here because the shoulder is rotating right there. Think about your shoulder and where it rotates. And hovering over the arm, I'm going to go ahead and drag out a shoulder bone. And then something I need to be mindful of, and this is something we'll fix as we go, is where is the points where we created that elbow joint, where that arm is going to bend. So it's going to be somewhere right around there. I can't see it right now, but I'm going to go ahead and drag out the rest of my arm. So I'm going to drag out the forearm, and same thing, holding down Shift and dragging down, I'm going to drag down the other arm. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. I first want to select Alt on the keyboard, and then drag out the same bones as the other side. Now the next bone that we're going to create is the pelvis bone for this whole pants area down here. So I'm going to select the root bone with Alt, and I'm going to create another bone right here. And again, all of this is connecting to this one root bone right there. The next thing I'm going to do, and this is going to make sense for this character, it might not make sense for all your characters. I'm going to bind my legs to this pelvis bone. So with this bone still selected, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drag out a bone for the front leg here. I'm going to drag one down there. And again, trying to keep in mind where those points are for that knee. I think it's somewhere right about there. And then I'm going to drag out a bone right there for the foot. Now, again, like I said before, in your design, this is where it matters, where you would kind of need to think of, okay, am I going to have toes? In this case, I don't have toes for this character, so I just drew out the one bone. Now go ahead and select your pelvis and do the same thing to the other side. Okay, awesome. Now, after you have done that, go ahead and select the Reparent Bone tool right here, and make sure your parenting is exactly what you see here on my screen. Again, with this root bone, everything should be pointing back or linking back to this main root bone. So again, we covered the Add Bone tool. We covered how to create bones with that Add Bone tool. We talked about the root bone. We talked a little bit about parenting with the bones. In the next video, we're going to name our bones, and I'll see you there. Want to learn more in depth everything there is to know about the rigging tools in Moho? what they are, and how to use them, then be sure to check out the complete rigging course to know exactly how to rig your character step by step. Want to take the course? Use promo code RIGGING2019 and get the course 50% off. Link is in the description.